Do you remember? The haunting melody that made the world weep? Do you remember? The image of that magnificent ship gliding through the golden sunset, carrying a love story that would transcend time itself? Close your eyes for a moment. Travel back with me, back to late 1997, back to a time when the world stood still, captivated by a tale of love and tragedy. James Cameron, the visionary director, had done the impossible. He'd convinced a studio to invest $200 million. $200 million. In 1997, this wasn't just a big budget. It was unprecedented. It was madness. Some said, the industry whispered that Cameron had finally gone too far. They called it Cameron's folly. They predicted disaster. They were wrong. When Titanic set sail into theaters in December 1997, it didn't just succeed. It conquered. It dominated. It became a phenomenon unlike anything cinema had ever witnessed. The numbers tell one story: $2.2 billion in worldwide box office revenue for over a decade. It stood unchallenged as the highest-grossing film of all time. 11 Academy Awards in a single night, matching the record set by Ben-Hur nearly 4 decades earlier. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Visual Effects. The list went on and on. But numbers can't capture everything. They can't capture the lines that wrapped around city blocks, the theaters packed night after night, week after week, month after month. The phenomenon of teenagers seeing it 5, 10, 15 times. The soundtrack that played on every radio station across America. The way an entire generation learned what epic romance could look like on screen. Titanic didn't just entertain. It became part of our cultural DNA. It redefined what a romantic epic could be. It proved that audiences still craved grand, sweeping stories told with passion and artistry. It made us believe that love could conquer class, circumstance, even death itself. The faces that brought this story to life became instant icons. Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack Dawson, the penniless artist with a heart full of dreams. Kate Winslet as Rose DeWitt Bukater, the society woman yearning to break free. Zane as the wealthy, controlling Cal Hockley. Kathy Bates as the indomitable Molly Brown. Frances Fisher as Rose's calculating mother. Ruth Danny Nucci as Jack's cheerful friend Fabrizio. David Warner as Cal's menacing bodyguard. Spicer Lovejoy. Victor Garber as Thomas Andrews, the ship's tragic architect. These actors didn't just play roles. They became part of something larger than themselves. They stepped into a moment in cinematic history that would define their careers, for better or worse, forever. Back then, they were young, hungry, full of dreams. Just like the characters they portrayed, they stood on the precipice of something extraordinary. Though they couldn't have known just how extraordinary it would become. But that was then. That was 1997. That was more than a quarter century ago. Time moves forward, relentlessly, inevitably. The faces change. The careers evolve. Some rise to even greater heights. Others fade from the spotlight. And sadly, some leave us entirely. So today, we ask a different question. Not where Jack and Rose went. We know their story ended in the icy Atlantic. But where did the real people go? The actors who gave them life? What happened to Leonardo and Kate? To Billy and Kathy? To all those faces we saw on that screen? In that movie that made the world cry? Let's find out. Let's begin this journey. And let's start where every journey through Titanic must begin. With the young artist who captured hearts around the world. Let's start with Jack Dawson. I'm the king of the world. Can you hear it? That voice. That moment. Jack Dawson standing at the bow of the ship. Arms outstretched. Face filled with pure, unbridled joy. It's one of the most iconic scenes in cinema history. And the young man who delivered it was only 22 years old. Leonardo DiCaprio wasn't completely unknown when Cameron cast him. He'd just finished Romeo and Juliet the year before. But Titanic catapulted him into a different stratosphere entirely. Overnight, he became the face of a generation. Teen idols had existed before. But Leo's fame was something different, something more intense. His face appeared on every magazine cover. His posters hung in millions of bedrooms. He couldn't walk down a street without being mobbed. But here's what's remarkable. Leo didn't let that define him. He didn't become just another pretty face. He didn't take the easy road of romantic comedies and action blockbusters. Those studios offered him everything. Instead, he made a choice. He chose substance over celebrity. He began one of the most extraordinary actor-director partnerships in modern cinema with Martin Scorsese. Gangs of New York, The Aviator, The Departed, Shutter Island, The Wolf of Wall Street, film after film. He proved he was more than Jack Dawson's charm and smile, and the Academy finally recognized it. In 2016, nearly 2 decades after Titanic, he won the Oscar for The Revenant. The speech was humble, grateful. The journey to that moment had been long. Today, at 49 years old, Leonardo DiCaprio remains one of the most bankable, respected actors in Hollywood. He's selective about his projects, passionate about environmental causes. He's worked with nearly every major director of our time. He'll never escape Jack Dawson completely, nor should he. That role gave him the platform to build something extraordinary, but he's proven, again and again, that he's so much more than the boy who won a poker game and boarded a doomed ship. But Jack's story was never complete without her, without Rose. You jump. You jump. Remember? Rose DeWitt Bukater. A woman torn between duty and desire, between the life she was supposed to live and the life she yearned for. Kate Winslet didn't just play her. She embodied her. She became her. Kate was 21 years old when Titanic filmed. A young British actress with immense talent, but no major Hollywood breakthrough yet. Landing the role of Rose changed everything. But it wasn't easy. The production was grueling. The water scenes were physically punishing. Kate caught pneumonia during filming. She nearly drowned in one scene. But she never complained. She never gave up. Her performance earned her an Oscar nomination. At 22, she became one of the youngest Best Actress nominees in Academy history. But unlike Leo, she didn't let Hollywood define her on its terms alone. She returned to Britain. She chose challenging roles over commercial ones. She refused to be just Rose from Titanic, and the work speaks for itself. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Finding Neverland, Little Children, Revolutionary Road, where she reunited with Leo, and then The Reader, which finally brought her that elusive Oscar in 2009. She didn't stop there. She conquered television, winning an Emmy for Mildred Pierce. She continued choosing complex Everside, difficult roles in films like Steve Jobs and Ammonite. She's directed, she's produced, she's become a fierce advocate for body positivity and authentic representation in media. Today, at 49, Kate Winslet stands as one of the most respected actresses of her generation. She's a dame of the British Empire, a mother, an artist who never took the easy path, even when Titanic's success could have guaranteed it. Her friendship with Leonardo DiCaprio remains strong. They talk regularly, support each other. They share a bond forged in freezing water and cinematic history. Rose found freedom on that ship. Kate found her voice, and she's used it powerfully ever since. But every great love story needs an obstacle. Every Romeo and Juliet needs their feuding families. Every Jack and Rose needed their Cal. The gun, the rage, the desperate chase through the flooding corridors of a dying ship. Cal Hockley was easy to hate, and Billy Zane played him perfectly. You're going to him? To be a whore to a gutter rat? The venom in those words? The entitled fury. The violence barely contained beneath a veneer of sophistication. Cal represented everything wrong with the old world. The class system, the ownership of women, the belief that money could buy anything, even love. Billy Zane was 30 years old when he took this role. He'd worked steadily in Hollywood for years, often playing handsome villains. But Cal Hockley was different. This wasn't just a bad guy. This was a symbol, an archetype, the controlling, abusive fiancé who saw Rose as property, not a person. Audiences disbeased him, which meant Billy had done his job brilliantly. It takes real skill to make a villain that memorable, that hated, that real. But here's the cruel irony of Hollywood. Playing a character everyone hates can typecast you. After Titanic's, Billy continued working. He appeared in dozens of films, television shows, independent projects. He's never stopped acting, but he never found another role that captured the public imagination the way Cal did. He's worked consistently. The Phantom, Tombstone before Titanic. Later, roles in television series like Charmed and Twin Peaks, The Return. But the trajectory that seemed inevitable after Titanic's success never quite materialized. Today, at 58, Billy Zane continues acting. He does smaller films. He appears at conventions. He's philosophical about his career. He knows Cal Hockley will likely be on his tombstone. And he's made peace with that. Sometimes in Hollywood, being too good at being bad means you're forever remembered for that one perfect villain. Cal Hockley was Billy Zane's masterpiece, even if it became both his greatest achievement and his longest shadow. But Titanic wasn't all villains and lovers. There were heroes too, like the unsinkable Molly Brown. Are you just going to sit there and let people freeze to death? We have room for at least 6 more. Molly Brown, the new money socialite. The woman from Colorado who didn't care about aristocratic rules. The one who commanded that lifeboat to turn around. To try? To save who they could. Kathy Bates brought her to life with warmth, humor, and indomitable strength. Kathy was already an Academy Award winner when she boarded Titanic. She'd won Best Actress for Misery in 1990, delivering one of the most terrifying performances in thriller history. But Molly Brown was different. Molly was light where Annie Wilkes was darkness. Molly was hope where Annie was horror. The real Molly Brown was a fascinating historical figure. She survived the sinking, indeed helped others survive, and went on to become a philanthropist and activist. Kathy captured her spirit beautifully. That combination of wealth and generosity, that refusal to let propriety stand in the way of doing what's right, and unlike some of her co-stars, Kathy's career didn't peak with Titanic. She kept working, kept growing. She became a television powerhouse. particularly through her recurring roles in American Horror Story, where she's played multiple characters across different seasons. She's been nominated for Emmys. She's done Broadway. She's remained a vital working actress for over 3 decades. She's also been open about her personal struggles, her battle with ovarian cancer, her eventual recovery, her continued advocacy for cancer awareness. She's used her platform for good. Today, at 76, Kathy Bates continues acting. Though she's hinted at retirement being near backable, she's earned it. From Misery to Titanic to American Horror Story, she's given us unforgettable performances. She's proven that character actresses can have long, celebrated careers if they're talented and persistent enough. Molly Brown couldn't sink. Neither could Kathy Bates. Both remain unsinkable in their own ways. But where Molly was warm, another woman on that ship was ice cold. Rose's mother, Ruth. Of course it's unfair. We're women. Our choices are never easy. Ruth DeWitt Bukater, Rose's mother, the woman who would sell her own daughter into a loveless marriage to save their social standing. Frances Fisher played her with steely determination and barely concealed desperation. Ruth wasn't a simple villain. She was more complex than that. She was a woman trapped by the same system that trapped Rose. But her response was to embrace the trap, to accept it, to enforce it. She'd learned to survive in a man's world by using the only currency available to her. Her daughter's beauty and youth. We are not beggars, she tells Rose coldly. But they are. Their aristocratic lifestyle is built on debt and deception. Cal is their salvation. Financially speaking, Ruth can't afford to let Rose's feelings or her own morality stand in the way of survival. Frances Fisher was 44 when she played Ruth. Already a familiar face from television, she'd had a long relationship with Clint Eastwood. Appeared in Unforgiven. She was a working actress, respected in the industry, though not yet a household name. Titanic raised her profile, but Frances continued doing what she'd always done, working steadily, choosing interesting roles over famous ones. She appeared in The Lincoln Lawyer, House of Sand and Fog. More recently, she had a prominent role in HBO's Watchmen series, proving she could still command the screen decades later. Today, at 72, Frances continues acting. She's been vocal about political issues, an advocate for women's rights. She's raised a daughter, actress Francesca Eastwood, who followed her into the profession. Ruth DeWitt Bukater was a woman whose choices were limited by her time. Frances Fisher has spent her career making choices Ruth never could. Choosing art, choosing integrity, choosing a life beyond what society expected. But Ruth and Cal weren't the only ones who cared about class divisions. There were also those who didn't care at all, like Jack's best friend, Fabrizio. We are the luckiest sons of bitches in the world, Fabrizio De Rossi, Jack's Italian friend, the man who won that poker game with him, who boarded Titanic with nothing but hope and dreams. Danny Nucci brought infectious joy to the role, making Fabrizio the friend everyone wishes they had. In the early scenes, Fabrizio is pure optimism. He and Jack are going to America. They're going to make their fortunes. They're going to live the dream. His enthusiasm is contagious. When he meets a pretty Swedish girl in third class, his clumsy attempts at romance are endearing. But Fabrizio's story ends in tragedy. During the sinking, he's crushed when a funnel collapses. It happens so quickly, so brutally, a reminder that the disaster took everyone, not just the famous passengers we'd come to know. Danny Nucci was 28 when he played Fabrizio. He'd had small roles before. The Rock, playing a Navy SEAL. Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger. But Titanic gave him his most memorable part, even if it was relatively brief. After Titanic's, Danny continued working steadily in television. He appeared in CSI and SIS, recurring roles in various series, but he never became a leading man. Never got that breakthrough role beyond Fabrizio. He's spoken warmly about the Titanic experience over the years. The camaraderie on set, the sense that they were making something special. Even if no one knew how special it would become, today, at 56, Danny Nucci still acts. Though he stepped back from the industry somewhat, he's focused on family, on life beyond Hollywood spotlight. He's comfortable being that guy from Titanic, recognizing that for many actors, having one iconic role is more than most ever get. Fabrizio dreamed of America. Danny made it there. And while superstardom eluded him, he built a solid, respectable career. But not all of Cal's people were as innocent as Fabrizio. Some were genuinely dangerous, like Spicer Lovejoy, the shadow behind Cal, the enforcer, the man who moved through the ship with menacing purpose. Spicer Lovejoy was the muscle behind Cal's money, and David Warner played him with chilling efficiency. Lovejoy wasn't given much dialogue. He didn't need it. His presence was enough. The way he watched Jack and Rose, the way he framed Jack for theft by planting the Heart of the Ocean necklace in Jack's pocket, the way he pursued them through the flooding ship with cold determination. He was loyal to Cal until the bitter end, drowning in the pursuit of his employer's vengeance. David Warner was 55 when he played Lovejoy. Already a veteran of stage and screen, British trained, classically educated. He'd been acting since the 1,960 seconds. He'd played villains in The Omen, evil computer programs in Tron, Shakespearean roles on stage. He brought gravitas to everything he touched. Titanic was just another job in a long, distinguished career, but he played it perfectly. Lovejoy could have been a cartoon henchman. Instead, Warner made him real, dangerous, believable. After Titanic's, David continued working prolifically. Television, film, voice work. He appeared in Planet of the Apes, played Chancellor Gorkin in Star Trek VI, did guest spots on countless TV series. He worked literally until the end of his life. In July 2022, David Warner passed away at the age of 80. The tributes poured in from around the world. Actors who'd worked with him, fans who'd loved his performances, directors who'd been honored to work with such a professional. His career spanned 6 decades, over 200 credits, from Shakespeare to science fiction, from period dramas to modern thrillers. He did it all. Lovejoy was just one role among hundreds, but it introduced him to a generation who might never have discovered his work otherwise. He's gone now, but his legacy lives on in every role he played, including that silent, menacing bodyguard on a doomed ship. Finally, there was one more man on that ship, a man who knew from the beginning how the story would end, the builder himself. The clock, the gentleman standing alone in the first-class smoking room, the ship's architect, Thomas Andrews. Knowing his creation is sinking, knowing he'll die with it, simply waiting. Victor Garber made that moment haunting in its quiet dignity. Thomas Andrews was the real-life designer of the Titanic. In the film, he's the voice of reason, the one who tells the ship's owners that the unsinkable ship will, in fact, sink. The one who gives Rose and Jack crucial information that helps them survive. The one who takes responsibility, staying aboard as his masterpiece becomes his tomb. Victor played him with understated nobility. No histrionics, no melodrama. Just a man accepting his fate with grace. That final scene, Andrew's adjusting the clock, straightening the room as water rises around him, is one of the film's most powerful moments. Victor Garber was 47 when Titanic filmed, a Canadian actor with extensive Broadway credits. He'd been nominated for Tonys, done television, but American audiences didn't really know him yet. Titanic changed that. After the film, Victor's career flourished. He became a television regular, most notably in the spy series Alias, where he played Jennifer Garner's father through 5 seasons. He appeared in Argo, earning acclaim for his portrayal of Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor. He's done Legends of Tomorrow, The Flash, countless guest appearances. He's also been open about his personal life. In 2013, he publicly confirmed he was gay and in a long-term relationship with model Rainer Andreessen. They married in 2015. His honesty about his life has made him a role model for LGBTQ actors in an industry that's slowly becoming more accepting. Today, at 75, Victor Garber continues working. He's a respected character actor, the kind Hollywood relies on to bring depth to supporting roles. He's dignified, professional, exactly what he showed us as Thomas Andrews. Andrews went down with his ship, but he did it with grace. Victor Garber has navigated Hollywood with the same quiet dignity, and that's no small achievement. So there you have it. 8 lives, 8 journeys, 8 different paths from that one moment in 1997 when they all came together to create something magical. Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet became legends. They took the fame Titanic gave them and transformed it into something enduring. They chose carefully. They worked with the best. They refused to be defined by one role, no matter how iconic. Today, they stand among the most respected actors of their generation. Zane created one of cinema's most memorable villains, but found that being too good at being bad can limit your options. He's worked steadily, lived well, but never quite recaptured that lightning in a bottle moment. Kathy Bates was already established, and Titanic only added to her legend. She kept working, kept growing, kept proving that talent and persistence matter more than age or appearance in this business. Frances Fisher and Danny Nucci found steady work, carved out respectable careers, lived lives they could be proud of. Not everyone becomes a superstar, and that's okay. There's honor in being a working actor, in building a career, one role at a time. David Warner left us in 2022, but he left behind a legacy of over 200 performances. From his first role to his last, he was a professional, a craftsman, an actor's actor. We're richer for having had him, and Victor Garber showed us that you can have a long, fulfilling career without ever becoming a household name. That character actors are the backbone of the industry. That quiet dignity matters as much as flashy stardom. 27 years have passed since Titanic sailed into theaters. More than a quarter century. The actors who boarded that ship as young hopefuls or established veterans are now in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Some have retired. One has passed on, but here's what time cannot touch. It cannot diminish what they created together. That film, that story, that moment in cinema history when everything aligned perfectly, the script, The direction, the music, the performances, the spectacle, the heart. My Heart Will Go On still plays. People still cry. New generations discover the film and fall in love with Jack and Rose. They still hate Cal, still root for Molly, still feel the tragedy of Andrews and Lovejoy and Fabrizio and everyone else who went down with that ship. The actors have moved on. They've lived their lives, made their choices, had their triumphs and disappointments, their joys and sorrows. They're human beings, not the characters they played. They've aged, as we all do, changed, as we all must, but on film, they're forever young, forever trapped in that moment. Jack will always be 20. Rose will always be 17. Cal will always be that wealthy villain. Molly will always be unsinkable. And the ship will always sink. Again and again. Every time someone presses play, that's the magic of cinema. It preserves moments, freezes time, lets us revisit the past even as the present rushes forward. The actors of Titanic have had their journeys. Some found continued glory. Others found quieter satisfaction. One found eternal rest. But all of them, every single one, gave us something precious. They gave us memories. They gave us a story we'll never forget. They gave us Titanic. And for that, they'll always be unsinkable in our hearts.